probably the most controversial model that BMW has ever brought us. Part luxury SUV, part sports coupe, it divides opinion yet is sold strongly. Hence the brand's high hopes for a second-generation lineup that adds a dash of maturity to this car's extrovert mix. It's sleeker, more practical and more efficient, yet it keeps in character by offering more power and astonishing dynamic prowess. In short, you'd like one. Let's see if this is you. You'd like a sports car. You need a large SUV, and you want something that's fashion conscious and stylish. Here's a model that claims to meet all these requirements. BMW's second generation X6. The original version of this car, first launched late in 2007 and updated in 2012, pioneered a whole new market niche for what the Munich maker calls sports activity coupes. Dynamic coupe-style models based on more conventional luxury SUVs, in this case BMW's X5. Initially, this was a genre widely disparaged by the so-called experts in the motoring press, but luxury segment family-conscious fashionistas loved the X6 from the first, and nearly 250,000 examples of the Mark I model now pound global roads. It was an astonishing total for such a niche product to have generated, and a number too large for rival prestige brands to ignore. By 2015, those competitors were finally ready to bring their X6 rivals to market. Jaguar with its F-Pace, Maserati with its Levante, and most significantly Mercedes with its GLE Class Coupe. BMW, though, was ready with this model, the second generation X6, a car better equipped than ever to deal not only with this fresh raft of competition, but also with rejuvenated versions of the two most dynamic entrants in the more conventional luxury SUV segment, Porsche's Cayenne and the Range Rover Sport. In taking on this opposition, this X6 aims to remind buyers that the BMW brand still claims ownership of this segment. It is, after all, still developing it, not only with this car, but also with the smaller X3-based X4 model, which aims to bring X6 values into the more affordable compact SUV segment. This, though, remains the definitive sports activity coupe, as extrovert, powerful and in-your-face as ever. Only perhaps when you look a little closer at this Mark II model will you discover that it also now has a more mature side to its nature, safer, more efficient and better connected. It's time, I think, to put it to the test. Back at the turn of the century, BMW's first generation X5 was so revolutionary in redefining the way an SUV could be made to handle on tarmac that the brand felt the need to coin a new name for the developed genre they felt it represented, that of the SAV, or Sports Activity Vehicle. Let's be clear. Without the dynamic excellence of first and second generation X5 models, the Bavarian brand could never have got away with the idea of a sports activity coupe like the X6. As it is, though, this car's place in the world, a kind of luxury off-roader, sports coupe, fast five-door combination, seems quite easy to justify when you drive the thing. To properly assess this second-generation X6 model's talents, it would probably have been most correct to choose the base xDrive 30D diesel variant, the one the majority of customers are likely to buy. The thing is, though, when you see a version on the list with 3 turbochargers developing 381 brake horsepower, it's a bit hard to resist. So that's what I'm sitting in here, the X6 in top diesel M50D guise. It's powered by basically the same 3-litre diesel engine you'll find in humbler variants, so economy is far from catastrophic. And I really can't think of another model in the lineup that better demonstrates the X6's breadth of talents. That's my excuse anyway. Before we get on to the specifics of this particular version, let's consider for a moment what makes this such a good car to drive. Primarily, it's got its priorities right, developed for tarmac use first and foremost, with BMW cheerfully emphasising the xDrive 4x4 system's priority in maximising on-road traction at the expense of off-road capability. They'll happily explain how, instead of mounting the engine and gearbox up high to be clear of water, as you get in any serious-minded SUV, they've mounted them low and as far back as possible for an aggressive centre of gravity to help spirited cornering. The result is a machine that, on a twisting country road, doesn't really feel very SUV-like at all, hence that Sports Activity Coupe tag. Whether anything weighing up to 2.2 tonnes and measuring over 1.7 metres in height can ever defy the laws of physics enough to match BMW's description of this model as a driver's car is another question. But there's no doubt that body control really is excellent for a vehicle of this kind. We'll get to the engine choice in a minute, but arguably more important to this car's whole dynamic ethos is the suspension choice you must make before deciding to buy one. There's a passive coil sprung setup as standard, but get a plusher model or resort to the options list and you really can build yourself quite a tarmac tool. An adaptive dynamic suspension package gives you active roll stabilisation to reduce body lean through the bends, plus dynamic performance control that shifts torque between the rear wheels through any given corner, depending on where it's needed. This package can be ordered separately or combined with either adaptive comfort or adaptive M suspension packages that give you self-leveling rear air suspension to improve the ride, and dynamic damper control so you can stiffen or sharpen that ride to suit the road you're on and the mood you're in. It all unfortunately costs more money, but at least the final feature I just mentioned, the dynamic damper control, works through a system that's standard on all X6s, BMW's Drive Performance Control. It's one of those setups you might be familiar with from other brands, where a press of a button tweaks steering feel, throttle response, stability control thresholds and gear shift times to be either super efficient, comfort orientated or overtly sporty. Here the requisite modes are termed Eco Pro, Comfort and Sport or Sport Plus. All of them controlled via this rocker switch next to the shard-like gear stick for the super smooth 8-speed Steptronic Sport automatic transmission. With dynamic damper control added into the spec of your car, you'll have the extra pleasure of ride quality exactly matching the Drive Performance Control response you select. Does it all work? To a point. Ultimately, all of the various systems deliver what they set out to achieve. With the active roll system fitted, it's especially astonishing to throw this car through a set of bends and marvel at its composure. And with the variable dampers and the air suspension installed, the comfort setting really is a rather lovely way to waft through the urban landscape. The problem is, though, that modern motoring is such a mix of landscapes, and because there's no Range Rover Sport-style set-and-forget auto setting to constantly choose the best mode for any given situation, you constantly find yourself flicking between the different options, sometimes unsure as to whether you've chosen the right one. A slight vagueness in the steering doesn't help either. Switching the Drive Performance Control rocker switch to Sport just artificially weights it up. Having said that, it's unerringly accurate and can be a bit sharper if you've chosen a variant that allows you to specify the extra cost active steering setup, or indeed you're enjoying the M Servotronic steering system featured on top M models like the one I'm trying here. Even on an ordinary X6, you quickly get used to the feel of the helm with familiarity and find yourself able to happily sling this BMW about if you want to, with tight cornering further aided by a standard automatic differential brake system, which works through the turns to counter both understeer and wheel spin by lightly micro-braking whichever front wheel is threatening to lose grip. Is it all ultimately enough to make this as rewarding a tarmac tool as a Porsche Cayenne or a Range Rover Sport? Probably not, but I can't imagine too many potential customers will care very much. People who'll likely be more than satisfied with the polished, cosseting way this X6 goes down the road. As for the speed that the road in question will disappear beneath you, well, I said earlier that I'd start by telling you about this M50D model, a storming thing that can deliver some industrial strength fireworks when you really prod it into life. 3 turbos and 740 Newton meters of torque will see to that. To be honest, I'm still trying to process that last figure. After all, a Lamborghini Aventador can only rustle up 690 newton-meters of pulling power. The result is a massive amount of performance, instantly on demand. The spec sheet tells me that this car will accelerate to 62 miles an hour in 5.2 seconds, and that BMW's software boffins will call time on its acceleration when it's registering 155 miles an hour. But that doesn't even come close to telling you how rapid this car feels in the real world. It's supercar quick, more rapid than an Audi R8 V10 in the 30 to 70 mile an hour overtaking increment, and as fast as a Lamborghini Murcielago over a standing kilometre. Plus, it's got very good brakes, and for a diesel, it also makes a pretty good noise. Of course, as I said at the beginning, most customers will choose a rather less aggressive 3-litre diesel in their X5, namely the 258 brake horsepower unit in the xDrive 30D variant that most customers choose. Even that car will easily dip under 7 seconds to 62 miles an hour and charge on to 143 miles an hour, so it's hardly slow and has enough torque to satisfy a 3,500 kilogram braked towing limit. There's also an xDrive 40D variant that ups the power to 313 brake horsepower, improving the sprint time to 5.8 seconds and the top speed to 149 miles an hour. As for other X6 engine choices, well, there's a 449 brake horsepower, 4.4 litre petrol V8 xDrive 50i variant that'll be a rare sight indeed on our roads, but which nevertheless is extremely fleet, demolishing the 62 mile an hour benchmark in just 4.8 seconds. The twin-turbo petrol V8 fitted to the top X6M model is predictably even faster, reducing the 0 to 62 miles an hour figure to just 4.2 seconds. Arguably more relevant is the petrol-electric plug-in hybrid version of this car the German engineers have developed, badged the X6 xDrive 40e. Here, a 241 brake horsepower 2-litre petrol engine is mated with a 111 brake horsepower electric motor for impressive four-wheel drive performance and a pure electric range of around 15 miles on a fully charged battery. I should finish by talking about four-wheel drive. BMW's capable xDrive setup are non-negotiable across the range. As you would expect, it's not a system designed for mud plugging, but it's still more capable on the dirt than most owners will ever need it to be, using an electronic clutch and the cleverness of the Bavarian brand's dynamic stability control system to alter drive from the normal 40-60 front-to-rear bias to a situation where in milliseconds 100% of power can be pushed either to the front or to the rear as necessary. It's all done automatically with no buttons or levers to push. The xDrive models also get hill descent control to ease down slippery slopes, but that's about it as far as BMW has gone in terms of off-tarmac prowess. You're always going to be limited here by ground clearance and the asphalt bias of the tyres, which is probably just as well. The styling of this model remains distinctively X6. That is, after all, why people like it, or at least why some people do. One BMW dealer described this to me as a love it or hate it Marmite car, and that pretty much hits the nail on the head. It's certainly not one for the shy and retiring. All your friends will have a view on whether that coupe-like tapering rear roofline really works or really doesn't. The standard 19-inch alloy wheels also lend the X6 the look of something that has just leapt straight from a designer's sketchbook. Flared wheel arches, long overhangs and big front air intakes complete an aggressive look that most buyers will want to embellish with the optional M Sport trim package. And it's wide, 15mm wider in fact than an X5, so car washes and road width restrictors will be challenging. As for the Mark II model changes, well, look closer and they become more obvious, designed to bring the look of this car into line with its smaller X4 stablemate and collectively adding a little extra maturity to the fashionable shape. At the front, there are X-shaped contours in the bumper and, on standard models, matte silver underbody protection panels to emphasise off-piste stability. They've been colour coordinated here. But probably more noticeable are the flatter, wider double kidney grilles, flanked by a pair of narrower headlights with distinctive LED daytime running light eyebrows. These lamp clusters are set above piercing front fog lamps and smeared to flow around onto prominent front wings. All of this contributing towards a more aerodynamic front end than you'd ever expect to find on any kind of SUV. In profile, the distinctive shape is defined by two sharp contours that are there to assist the coupe-like roofline in emphasising this car's supposed sportiness. Both creases emerge from the wheel arches, one at the front that stretches upwards and finishes at the rear door handles, while the other follows the line of the rear wheel arch to give the X6 a purposeful, sporty stance. What you probably won't notice is something the brand is especially proud of. It's aero curtains, drag-reducing vertical apertures that guide inflowing air around the front wheel arches to create a curtain of air over the wheels that then makes a controlled escape through air breathers on the side panels. At the rear, the designers have added horizontal lines intended to accentuate this car's prodigious width. Plus, there's a sense of robustness reinforced by matte silver underbody protection, here again body-coloured, a powerful bumper and a flat apron. The servicing of the high-opening powered tailgate helps here too. It's one of those that if you're approaching the car laden down with bags, you can work with a waft of your foot beneath the bumper, which is a useful feature to have. Once the rear hatch is open, you'll find yourself having to put your bags in or take them out again over a pretty high loading sill. Still, at least the cargo capacity here is reasonable, 580 litres, plus this storage area under the floor if you don't opt for the space-saver rear wheel. I don't think it'll bother too many potential buyers much to learn that this capacity is about 10% less than you get from this car's most direct rival, Mercedes GLE Coupe. They'll certainly be anticipating that tapering coupe-style roofline to reduce luggage capacity of the kind of space that could be expected from boxier, more conventionally shaped sporty luxury SUVs like Porsche's Cayenne and the Range Rover Sport. If you need more room for longer items, then the rear bench splits 40-20-40 so that you can push the middle seat down for the carriage of skis and things. And the entire backrest flattens to reveal 1,525 litres. That's 75 litres more than the first generation X6 could offer. All well and good. Where you might be expecting problems, though, is when it comes to a seat in the rear. That sloping rear roofline has to tell somewhere, and sure enough, the really tall may well feel a little cramped. Still, BMW has contoured the roof to make the best of what's on offer, and as a result, averagely sized adults should be quite comfortable. There's a fold-down centre armrest that includes a neat lidded storage compartment and these dual cup holders. In theory, 3 adults can be accommodated back here these days. The original Mark I version of this car was only designed to take 2 in the back. In practice, though, any middle seat occupant is going to be condemned to a rather uncomfortable perch on this raised centre section, though at least there's a bit more space than you might expect for their feet. The transmission tunnel isn't too prominent. A trio of kids will certainly be fine. And up front, well, the previous generation model was already very nice to sit in, but here things feel more upmarket still, with some lovely use of leather and some very high-quality plastics. Just look at the intricacy of the parts, the use of textures and the design effort that's been put into something as simple as this door panel, for example. The way this optional American oak wood trim blends with the stitched leather betrays a real intricacy of attention to detail. So yes, I really like the way that BMW has approached this cabin. Now, it's not as extrovert as that of a rival Mercedes GLE Class Coupe, but you get a class and purity of design that delivers a very upmarket feel indeed, especially with the pure extravagance, ivory white, bicolour Napa leather trim option that I've got here. You sit slightly lower than you would in a conventional large luxury SUV, which accentuates the sportier feel, gripping a lovely tactile wheel through which you glance virtual instrumentation that's a model of class and clarity. The centrepiece of the dash is this vast 10.2-inch infotainment display screen, which is marshalled by the much improved xDrive control system, now as intuitive and smart as you could ever want it to be. What it no longer does is try to replace every single switch and knob on the dashboard, with the result in this M50D being nearly 60 buttons scattered around the place. To be fair, they're all logically grouped, and BMW does seem to have a better handle than most makers on which functions are needed on the dash and which can live within on-screen menus. These menus include a range of helpful features, like a screen that allows you to monitor the way the xDrive system is working, together with a useful compass. There are also sport gauge displays and various useful vehicle status functions that show you everything from service requirements to engine oil level and tyre pressure features. There's also a trip computer. And you've got lots of various storage compartments dotted around the cabin. A usefully sized glove box, decently sized door pockets that can hold a 1.5 litre bottle. You've got cup holders behind this cover here in front of the gear stick, and a nice split folding centre storage box. There's a model-for-model premium of around £2,500 over BMW's X5 to own this more stylish X6. That means X6 pricing that sits primarily in the £52,000 to £68,000 bracket, or at least it does in the mainstream lineup. You can pay nearly £95,000 for this car if you opt for the top X6M version. That desirable flagship derivative is one of two models in the range to use petrol power. The other is the £65,000 xDrive 50i, with both these X6s using a 4.4 litre twin-power turbo V8. Nearly all buyers, though, will be wanting one of the 3-litre diesels, with over 80% of them likely to be satisfied by the 258 brake horsepower xDrive 30D, offered at the entry-level price point. A premium of around £2,700 over that car gets you the pokier 313 brake horsepower xDrive 40D. And in the case of both variants, you could opt to pay a premium of around £4,700 to graduate up from standard SE spec to the more dynamic-looking M Sport trim level. Mind you, ordering an X6 40D in that M Sport guise would leave you needing to find a budget of close to £60,000. And if you were going to do that, then you might well be tempted to go a bit further and stretch to the £67,000 or so needed for the very top X6 diesel, the potent tri-turbo 381 brake horsepower M50D variant that I've been trying here. And rivals? Well, at least this second-generation X6 has some. The original version of this car was the only sporty coupe-style luxury SUV you could buy, with potential customers likely to be tempted away only by the most dynamic entrants in the ordinary luxury 4x4 segment, models like Porsche's Cayenne and the Range Rover Sport. These two contenders remain as potential alternatives, with the Cayenne able to undercut most directly comparable equivalent X6 models by between £1,500 and around £5,000, depending on the variant you're looking at. A Range Rover Sport, though, is vastly more expensive. It's around £10,000 pricier in entry-level guise, but go for a pokier diesel version and you'll pay well over £80,000 for one. In truth, though, both of these cars are more accurately targeted by this X6's squarer, less coupe-like X5 stablemate. No, there are closer matches you can make in the search for potential direct alternatives to X6 ownership. Maybe Maserati's Levante or Jaguar's F-Pace, for example. Both these brands new to this segment and selling cars that'll cost you significantly more. We'd look first, though, at the car developed most closely against this BMW, and therefore its most comparable rival, the Mercedes GLE Class Coupe. The GLE has around 10% more luggage space than this X6, but otherwise asks its buyers to put up with a significant number of drawbacks in comparison with this Munich model. The Mercedes offers a more limited range of engines for a start, and its main petrol derivative, the GLE 450 4MATIC, has much less power than its equivalent X6 xDrive 50i rival. More significant, though, is the fact that the volume GLE 35D 4MATIC diesel variant is nearly £10,000 pricier than an identically powerful X6 xDrive 30D, and worse, costs much more to run. It all leaves BMW still sitting very comfortably indeed in the sports activity coupe segment it first invented, with an advantage it aims to consolidate with very generous levels of standard equipment. As before, all X6 models get xDrive four-wheel drive, an 8-speed Steptronic Sport automatic transmission and drive performance control, so you can fine-tune the throttle, the steering and the gear change response via Eco Pro, Comfort, Sport and Sport Plus modes. Plus, every version now gets the 3-person rear bench you had to specify as an option on the first generation X6. Beyond that, the basic kit list is very extensive, even in standard SE guise, with all models getting alloy wheels of at least 19 inches in size, as well as automatic power-washed xenon headlights and rain-sensing wipers, front fog lamps, an electrically operable tailgate, power-folding heated electric mirrors, chromed exhaust pipes, metallic paint, and park distance control front and rear parking sensors. Inside, there are part-electric heated front seats trimmed in Dakota leather, dual-zone air conditioning, ambient lighting, brushed aluminium inlays, cruise control with a braking function, and a multi-function leather-trimmed sport steering wheel with gear shift paddles. Plus, as you'd expect, there's BMW's now much simpler to use iDrive infotainment system with its 10.2-inch colour screen, via which you access not only a high-quality 6-speaker stereo with a DAB tuner and Bluetooth phone connectivity, but also built-in satellite navigation and a 20-gigabyte hard disk onto which you can store your personal music library. There's the usual USB and aux-in points, along with voice control functionality. And this is also the portal from which you can access a whole suite of included BMW connected drive services. These include a package of online services that can give you news and weather reports, and on the move read them back to you, along with various useful office functions that'll please business folk. There's also a real-time traffic information feature that can guide you around hold-ups on your chosen route. Plus, all models are able to use downloadable BMW apps for worldwide web radio, customised music programming and access to Facebook and Twitter. You can even set up this BMW to use the Google Center Car system so that routes can be planned beforehand on your PC, then remotely forwarded to your car. You can build on this with an optional connected drive services package that gives you 2 key extra features. First, 24-hour access to BMW's customer information centre for just about anything you might need to know on the move. And second, various remote services that, via the information centre or your smartphone, allow you to do things like remotely lock or unlock your car, find it if you forget where you parked it, remotely flash your headlights, or use Google's local search system. It's all very nice, but this is a car you need to dress if it's to fully impress. There are a range of optional and very tempting so-called pure extravagance design interior and exterior packages to help you do that. This car, for example, has the ivory white interior package with lovely bicolour Napa leather. These finishes can also be combined with the premium sporty M Sport spec most buyers will want. Outside, this adds these larger 20-inch M double-spoke alloy wheels, M aerodynamic body styling and high-gloss shadowline exterior trim. Inside, the M Sport package includes front sport seats and a lovely thick M leather steering wheel with gear shift paddles. It's fairly straightforward then to get the aesthetics of this car looking sharp. Make sure, though, that you put equal effort into ensuring that the driving experience is equally carefully tailored via various different adaptive suspension setups. There's an adaptive comfort suspension package that's optional on base SE spec models, and an adaptive M suspension package that's standard on M Sport variants like this one. Now, either way, you get a transformation in this car's road-going behaviour through a combination of air suspension for the rear axle and dynamic damper control. The first element will give you softer low-speed ride when you want it, while the damping control allows you to firm up or soften the X6's ride quality to suit your preference via the various Comfort, Sport and Sport Plus settings of the Drive Performance Control System. The third main suspension option is what BMW calls its adaptive dynamic suspension package, there to give you everything the brand knows about making cars this big handle so well, courtesy of two key features. The first of these, dynamic performance control, works through the curves to push torque between left and right-hand rear wheels so that the side of the car that can best use the power always has most of it. The result is extra traction and greater lateral acceleration. Even more noticeable is the dynamic package's second key feature, dynamic drive with active roll stabilisation, there to limit body roll through the turns in a way that's quite remarkable given this vehicle's size and height. In an ideal world with this car, of course, you'd have all the advantages of all the various chassis setups I've just mentioned, all rolled up into one complete package. So, air suspension and dynamic damper control easing you over our country's terrible tarmac, and dynamic performance control and active roll stabilisation straightening out the bends. Well, that's exactly what you can have by opting for the fourth X6 chassis package, the so-called professional one. It's the way to go with this car if you can afford to. Once all the ride and handling features are sorted out to your satisfaction, there's plenty of more conventional optional kit on offer if you do have a little extra in your budget. This car gets the desirable Harman Kardon surround sound stereo system, though if it were mine, I'd have been tempted to go further and trade up to the full house 16-speaker 1200 watt premium Bang & Olufsen setup. Either system can be combined with a rear seat entertainment package that comes with or without a TV tuner and is inclusive of screens for backseat passengers. As a buyer, I'd also want to consider the parking assistant system that can not only identify spaces and steer you into them, but also operate the throttle and brake as well while you're doing it. You could pair that with an optional reversing assist camera, or go even further and add in the optional surround view monitor with its 360-degree display. With all that fitted, you really will be doing well to get a parking scrape. That surround view monitor will also help towers, who'll certainly want to consider the optional electrically pivoting trailer coupling to make hitching up that bit easier. Other key options include soft closed doors, sun protection glass and a head-up display that projects key information onto the bottom of the windscreen. I'd also want what BMW calls comfort access, which allows you to open the doors and start the engine while keeping the key in your pocket. And when you're laden down with bags, enables you to open the power tailgate by waving your foot beneath the bumper. Inside, options like American oak interior wood trim and a ceramic finish for the controls lift the cabin ambience, while special optional comfort seats make it feel more luxurious. As a buyer, I'd also want to look at things like adaptive LED headlights that turn with the bends, and the night vision system too, if I could afford it. Plus, you might want important practicalities like roof rails, aluminium running boards, a luggage compartment mat that protects the cargo bay, and the extended storage pack that gives you nets that'll keep things in place in the loading area. And of course, you could add in a few fashionable niceties too. Things like an electric glass sunroof, ventilated seats, LED door sill finishers, and larger 21-inch wheels. There's also a neat snap-in adapter for all compatible smartphones with a micro USB port that can charge your handset and improve its reception. Safety-wise, there are the usual twin front, side and curtain airbags, plus all kinds of electronic systems, such as switchable DSC dynamic stability control, backed up by a DTC dynamic traction control setup to keep you on the straight and narrow. There's a hill start assistant to stop you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions, plus hill descent control to ease you down slippery slopes off the beaten track. The ABS braking system is aided by DBC dynamic brake control and CBC cornering brake control. Plus there's a brake drying function to ensure that even in the wet, your brakes react in an instant. There's also an automatic differential brake and brake standby. This latter feature detects when your foot moves rapidly from the accelerator pedal and predicts that you're going for the brakes. It then moves the brake pads closer to the discs and gives you instantaneous and powerful braking response, which could make the difference between a near miss and a really bad day. There's a tyre puncture warning system and ISOFIX child seat fastenings too. But my favourite feature is the standard BMW emergency call setup that will automatically summon help in an accident, alerting the emergency services to your exact GPS location. Could be a lifesaver. The key safety option is what BMW calls its driving assistant pack, which includes 6 key electronic camera-based features. Now, these include forward collision warning to tell you if you're getting too close to the car in front, a high beam assistant that automatically dips your headlights for you at night in the face of oncoming traffic, a preventative pedestrian protection feature that warns you if someone's about to step off the pavement in front of you, a speed limit information setup that pictures road signs as you pass and displays them on the dash, a lane departure warning system to stop dozy drivers veering out of their lanes on the highway, and, perhaps most importantly, a city collision mitigation system that, at urban speeds, scans the road ahead as you drive, looking for accident hazards. If one is detected, you'll be warned. If you don't respond or aren't able to, the brakes will automatically be applied to decrease the severity of any resulting accident. You can further add to this package too. The Driving Assistant Plus pack includes everything I've just mentioned, plus 2 further features. A congestion assistant will control the speed of the car and the distance to the vehicle ahead in dense traffic or maybe in motorway tailbacks at speeds of up to 38 miles an hour. Autonomous control at higher speeds, meanwhile, is dealt with by camera-based cruise control, featuring a stop-and-go function. This not only constantly keeps you a safe distance behind the car in front at a motorway cruise, but also, if you come across a tailback, can even slow you to a stop and start you off again. With fuel savings of up to 22% over its first-generation predecessor, this Mark II Model X6 deals head-on with the accusation that big SUVs carry with them big running costs. To prove the point, let me run a few numbers past you concerning the car I'm driving here, the X6 M50D. Here's a 381 brake horsepower, 2-ton luxury 4x4 that gets within a sniff of a Porsche 911 GT3 over a standing kilometre, yet can seat up to 5 people and return 42.8 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle. Emissions, this car delivers 174 grams per kilometre, which makes it nearly 50% cleaner than a rival Range Rover Sport 4.4 ST V8. It's another world. The entry-level, volume-selling 258 brake horsepower xDrive 30D diesel model might not be as neck-snappingly rapid as the car I'm trying here, but it can turn in some even better economy and emissions figures as a result. In direct rivals like the Mercedes GLE Coupe 35D, Porsche's Cayenne diesel, or the Range Rover Sport 3-litre ST V6, well, you'd be looking at a combined cycle reading of, well, no more than around 40 miles to the gallon for this class of car, plus a CO2 reading in either the 170s or the 180s. In an entry-level diesel X6, in contrast, 47.1 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle is supposed to be possible, along with 157 grams per kilometre of CO2. These are figures that will make a big difference to your end-of-year bottom line and your tax status. Choose the pokier 313 brake horsepower xDrive 40D diesel variant, and those returns aren't too heavily affected either. The readings falling only to 45.6 miles to the gallon and 163 grams per kilometre. Of course, if you're one of the few buyers brave enough to opt for petrol power in this car, you'll need to be managing your expectations somewhat in this regard. There's only so much, after all, that can be done with a throbbing 4.4-litre twin-turbo petrol V8. Still, the 449 brake horsepower xDrive 50i variant delivers 29.1 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 225 grams per kilometre of CO2. Figures that are about the same as those you get from a rival 420 brake horsepower Porsche KNS, and returns which are not significantly higher than those of Mercedes' far less powerful 372 brake horsepower GLE Coupe 450. Opt for the top petrol version of this BMW, the rip-snorting X6M, and that 4.4-litre turbo delivers 25.4 miles to the gallon and 258 grams per kilometre. All of the figures I've quoted you assume that you've engaged the Eco Pro driving mode that adapts the engine management, the accelerator response and the gear shift change points to support a fuel-efficient driving style, and even programs the climate control and heated seats and mirrors for the most efficient use of energy. In conjunction with the sat-nav system, the Eco Pro setting can, through a proactive driving assistant function, even advise the driver to ease off the accelerator when approaching corners or lower speed limit areas. On top of that, of course, you've got a whole raft of integrated BMW efficient dynamics technologies to explain why all this car's running cost numbers are so darn good. Do I need to be specific? Well, all the engines are, of course, Euro 6 emissions compatible, and the diesels use a combination of an NOx nitrogen oxide absorber catalyst, selective catalytic reduction, and a clever AdBlue urea injection system that turns the vast majority of NOx in the exhaust stream into harmless nitrogen and water. On top of all this, there are more familiar efficient dynamics features like electromechanical power steering, brake energy regeneration, on-demand control of engine ancillary components, low rolling resistance tyres, and an auto stop-start system that cuts the engine when you don't need it, stuck in traffic or waiting at the lights. Plus, there's a coasting function that works by disengaging the clutch every time you lift off the throttle at cruising speeds to allow the car to coast unencumbered by engine braking. It also helps, of course, that aerodynamics have been improved thanks both to a lower drag coefficient and the benefits of the so-called aero curtain, there to wrap the front wheels in their own cocoon of air to reduce turbulence. It's all fiendishly clever stuff. So, how does all this leave the X6 in overall running cost terms once you also factor in things like insurance, residual values and the cost of servicing? Let's start with insurance groupings, which start at 45 for the xDrive 30D model, rising to either 46 or 47 for an xDrive 40D, before culminating at Group 50 for this M50D. The petrol-powered xDrive 50i variant is Group 49, and the X6M, of course, Group 50. Residual values are next. Not quite as strong as those of a rival Porsche Cayenne, but as good or better than the figures that you'll get from just about any other car in this segment. And servicing? Well, as usual with a BMW, there's a condition-based service indicator, but new to me was the clever teleservices feature that comes as part of the BMW Connected Drive services you can access through the iDrive infotainment system. Via this, before each service appointment is due, your X6 will put in a teleservices call to your nominated BMW service centre, complete with detailed information on vehicle condition. You'll then get a call to arrange a service appointment, something you'll already have budgeted for if, at the point of original purchase, you opted for one of the two fixed cost service inclusive or service inclusive plus packages, which cover you for 5 years or 50,000 miles. Finally, if running costs are everything, I should also point out that BMW has also created a plug-in petrol-electric hybrid xDrive 40e version of this car, though it wasn't available at the launch of this second-generation model range. This variant still features four-wheel drive and mates a 241 brake horsepower 2-litre petrol engine with a 111 brake horsepower electric motor for impressive performance. A button on the centre console allows the driver to switch to a pure electric, battery-only driving mode, though only for around 15 miles. That might not sound like much, but with government studies suggesting the average person's daily commute to be no more than about 13 miles, this might be more than enough for many users to cover quite a lot of their miles on battery power alone. BMW puts forward some impressive stats for this particular variant, talking of a combined cycle fuel figure of around 75 miles to the gallon and an average CO2 emissions return of under 90 grams per kilometre. This car is an opinion divider and probably always will be. That won't worry BMW though. Rather than filling a niche with this X6, the Bavarian maker has instead created one tailor-made for its approach to driving dynamics and product development. Rivals may try and copy the concept, but ultimately there's nothing quite like this car. Of course, you'll still need to be a very individual kind of buyer to want one. Someone who thinks a bit outside the box. A rebel? Maybe not so much this time around. This second generation X6 is a slightly more mature, acceptable choice than its predecessor. Still extrovert, but a tad less in your face. It's also easier to justify over something more conventional now that it's more practical, better equipped and more efficient, as well as being more affordable than a whole series of recently introduced direct rivals. Does the world need cars like this? Absolutely not. But would its better-heeled inhabitants like one? Absolutely yes. In increasing numbers, the motoring public seems to love the sports activity coupe concept, proving, of course, that nothing succeeds like excess.